The Pacific Northwest is full of mysteries, from Bigfoot to ghost stories and, of course, the disappearance of D.B. Cooper.
Another mystery buried deep in the hills of eastern Washington keeps resurfacing, a bottomless pit said to be a pathway to the paranormal.
Deep in the hills of Washington, a strange pit has fueled endless theories, mysteries, and fears. They call it Mel's Hole, a bottomless abyss, according to Mel Waters, where strange events unfold and the rules of reality seem to break apart, sparking debates about what really hides in the darkness below. This is believed to be a place that bends the laws of nature, yet recent claims also point to something else. What lies beneath isn't just emptiness. It's something dark, powerful, and 100 times bigger than you think. Join us as we find out what's waiting at the bottom of Mel's Hole. The Bottomless Pit. In February of 1997, a strange story began to spread from the small town of Ellensburg, Washington. It started when a man named Mel Waters phoned into a late-night radio show called Coast to Coast AM, hosted by Art Bell. The show was already known for strange tales and local myths, but what Mel shared stood out. He said that he had found a hole on his property that seemed to have no end. From the start, his claim drew people in, and as the weeks and years went by, his descriptions of this pit became stranger and harder to believe. Mel explained that the hole was located about 9 miles west of Ellensburg, somewhere in Kittitas County. He did not give exact directions, but he insisted that locals already knew about it. According to him, people had been throwing things into it for generations, using it like a bottomless dump. He even said that settlers from the early days of the region had called it the Devil's Hole. That detail gave the story a darker weight, as though the place had always been feared and talked about. Mel said that even his own dogs were afraid of walking close to the hole and would grow uneasy whenever he brought them near. This made him more curious. He decided to test how deep the hole might be, so he tied a heavy object to the end of a fishing line and began lowering it down until he had dropped nearly 80,000 feet of line into the darkness. Despite all that length, the weight never seemed to hit bottom. The line had gone down further than any natural pit should allow, and that was the moment he realized he had stumbled upon something impossible. Only days later, he returned to the radio show with more to share. Each time he called in, the tale grew stranger. He spoke about a neighbor who had lost a dog, and the neighbor decided to throw it into the hole to dispose of the body. Not long after, the same dog appeared alive again, roaming the woods near the property. It wore the same collar, yet it acted differently, almost as if it was not the same dog anymore. Mel used this story to argue that the hole could bring lifeless things back in some twisted form. Now, this is where things start to get bizarre. Mel said that he once found an old German pistol from World War II buried in the dirt near the hole. When fired, the gun produced no sound at all. Instead, when the weapon was placed next to a radio, the radio would begin to broadcast voices and sounds from the past, as though the hole could somehow reach through time. Mel described this discovery as one of the strangest of all, because it tied the pit not only to the earth, but also to history itself. Other objects behaved in ways that made no sense when near the hole. Mel said that metals could change into different kinds of metals. Radios would pick up strange voices, some speaking in languages he could not identify, and sometimes music from eras long gone. In another experiment, a bucket of ice was lowered into the pit. When it was pulled back up, the ice was still solid, but strangely warm to the touch. To make it even stranger, the ice had also become flammable. Mel also noticed a red envelope lying near the pit. Inside were dimes minted in 1943, but they carried a B mint mark that had never existed on official United States coins. He believed this was another sign that the hole was connected to some other timelines or realities. One other detail Mel often repeated was the unnatural way sound behaved near the pit. No matter what was dropped into it, there was never any echo or sound of it striking bottom. The objects vanished without a trace, swallowed by the endless darkness. As years went by, Mel returned to the radio several times. In 1997, again in 2000, and once more in 2002. Each time, his claims became larger, stranger, and harder to dismiss as simple invention. People who listened to Mel's calls began to wonder if there was more to the story than simple imagination. He hinted at interference from the government, suggesting that powerful people knew about the pit and wanted to keep it hidden. He often refused to say exactly where it was, which made the mystery even deeper. Mel described the hole as something that bent the rules of nature, a place where life and death could cross paths, where time could twist, and where matter itself could transform. He spoke as though the pit was a kind of doorway to forces beyond human knowledge. The longer the tale carried on, the harder it was to separate fact from fiction. With every new detail, the legend of Mel's Hole grew into one of the strangest tales to ever come out of the Pacific Northwest. However, the risk it posed to Mel's life was inevitable. Controversies surrounding the Mel's Hole mystery. In 2000, Mel Waters called the radio station again and explained how his life had taken another strange turn. After being away for some time, he returned home to find his driveway blocked off. Armed soldiers stood guard and refused to let him through. They told him that a plane had crashed on the ridge above his land and the area was no longer safe. Mel later revealed that the government had seized his entire property. He was banned from visiting the mysterious hole again and was handed a payoff to stay away. Accepting the money, he announced that he was moving far from Washington. His plan was to go all the way to Australia, where he intended to grow medicinal plants and set up a preserve for wombats. However, when he returned to the air in 2002, the story became even more unusual. Mel claimed that after coming back from Australia, he had been kidnapped by government agents. He described how he woke up in San Francisco weeks later with no memory of what had happened in between. There were marks on his arm where an IV had been inserted, and sticky tape residue suggested that he had undergone some kind of procedure. On top of this, he noticed that his rear molar teeth were missing. His wallet was gone as well, along with a belt buckle he treasured, which he said was crafted from 3 Roosevelt dimes he had once found near the hole. Mel also believed that an object had been placed inside his mouth. He was convinced that the government had hidden a tracking device in his teeth. Around the same time, others began to speak out about the hole as well. One voice that stood out was Red Elk, a medicine man from the Katitas Valley who belonged to several tribal traditions. In February, he spoke with a Seattle television crew about the story, though he refused to take them directly to the location. He explained that he would no longer lead journalists out to the site. His reason was simple. He believed the hole was dangerous and spiritually misleading. To him, searching for it distracted people from what truly mattered. Red Elk had made similar comments in September 2008, when he shared his own story during a broadcast of the late-night radio show Coast to Coast with Art Bell. According to him, the hole served as an entrance to a hidden underground facility linked to a secret project. He warned that already the government had control of it and that it was completely off-limits to the public. He even said the location had been carefully disguised to blend in with the surrounding landscape, making it nearly impossible for ordinary people to find. Despite his warnings, Red Elk also expressed frustration with the media. He explained how reporters often twisted his words or made him look dishonest. He insisted that he had been misrepresented more than once, which left him reluctant to speak about the hole again. Yet, when he reflected on the segment filmed by the Como News team, he admitted that they had treated the subject respectfully and had done a fair job in presenting his perspective. Meanwhile, local reporters decided to investigate the man behind the story. When they dug into public records, they discovered something unusual. There was no sign of anyone named Mel Waters ever living in the area. No deeds, no property records, nothing that tied him to Katitas County. This discovery made the story even more confusing. For some, the absence of records looked like proof of a government cover-up. For others, it suggested something much simpler, that Mel Waters never existed in the first place, and that the entire saga was the work of a storyteller. Still, the legend refused to fade away. Even though many considered it impossible for such a bottomless pit to exist, the story had already taken hold in the public imagination. The incredible claims only stirred up more curiosity. By 2002, stories about the hole had spread so widely that groups of people began trying to track it down themselves. One gathering of around 30 people made a serious attempt to locate the pit. They searched the area where Mel had claimed it existed, but after hours of effort, they left disappointed, unable to find any trace of it. After that year, Mel stopped calling in, and his voice disappeared from the airwaves. Yet the mystery of the hole went on, whispered in conversations, shared on forums, and revisited in late-night discussions. The lack of answers only pushed people to keep searching. For every skeptic who dismissed the story, there were others who felt compelled to hunt for the truth, convinced that somewhere in the hills above Ellensburg, or perhaps somewhere nearby, a strange and endless pit still waited to be found. And it wasn't long before it was. Into the depths. 5 people came together with one clear purpose. They wanted to lower a camera into the strange hole and capture what was inside. These were not random explorers. They were producers, drone operators, and skeptics who had chased mysteries for years. They were used to chasing leads that often went nowhere, but this time felt different. The plan was simple but serious. They would send down the device, watch the feed, record everything, and leave nothing out. They wanted to find out what lay beneath, no matter what they faced. The group worked through the night on the equipment. They set up at the edge of the site with the same level of care soldiers use before going into unknown ground. The drone was no ordinary model. It had been built to survive heavy pressure and strange conditions. The body was fitted with a strong light camera that could film in the dark, along with sensors to track heat, movement, and unusual energy. The wire was just as important as the drone. It had been built to hold up against weight, heat, and sharp pulls. No one wanted to take chances, not on this. When morning came, the team stood ready. The winch let out a low hum as the wire unspooled and the drone dropped slowly into the hole. Mist hung in the air as the small lights blinked against the stone. First the camera went in, then the thick line of wire followed, coiling deeper into the dark shaft. Everyone leaned in toward the screen, eyes locked on the clean feed. There was no blur, no interference. The picture was sharp and steady. The first few hundred feet looked plain. The walls were smooth and almost shiny, unlike natural rock. They looked carved, as if shaped by hands and not by nature. There were no cracks, no dust, no roots, no marks left by animals, just a clean surface stretching downward. The sound feed added to the strangeness. It picked up nothing. No whisper of air, no echo, only emptiness. As the camera sank deeper, a new detail caught the team off guard. The temperature readings began to fall, not slowly, but all at once. Lights blinked red on the monitor as the numbers dropped below what anyone thought possible at that depth. The air inside the shaft measured colder than places found near frozen seas, yet the wire showed no frost. The machine kept working, unaffected, while the crew stood in shock, staring at the impossible readings. Around 300 feet down, something flickered on the screen. It looked faint, almost like a small breath of light. The drone shifted, the camera turned, and sharpened focus. But nothing was there where the glow had been. It had come from somewhere deeper, out of sight. Then the flicker returned, stronger this time, then vanished again. By the time the drone reached 400 feet, the glow showed up once more, brighter and strange. It looked like glass catching the sun, except they were deep underground. Then came another change. The surface of the walls no longer seemed solid. They looked as if they were moving, bending like water. The colors on the feed turned strange, unnatural. The sensors picked up a weak but real pulse in the magnetic field. The compass swung off balance, no longer pointing where it should. The drone drifted, not as if pulled, but as if space itself stretched around it. The crew kept writing down notes, recording everything, but an uneasy weight pressed over them. By the time the machine dropped to 508 feet, the screen showed something that froze every person standing there. Out of nowhere, a shape appeared. It was not a blur. It was not static. It looked like a figure, a form that hovered between the wall and the eye of the camera. It stayed there, clear enough to unsettle anyone, and then the feed cut out. No signal, no warning, just black. The drone stopped sending data. The wire stayed loose, but the machine at the other end was gone. The team worked the crank to bring it back up, turning slowly, hoping for some sign. The line came back without weight. Nothing was attached. The drone had vanished, lost in the depths. The five stood around the rig, unsure of what to do next. They had not streamed the event. No one outside their circle knew what had happened. The only proof was what they had seen with their own eyes and recorded from the live feed. They had gone there to find answers, and instead, they walked away carrying questions they could never shake off. They left the site carefully, moving their gear with stiff hands. None of them spoke much. Fear had crept into their bones, not because of the failure of the machine, but because of the shape they had witnessed. What they had seen did not belong to any world they knew. They had gone there searching for secrets, but they had found something that changed everything. Deep within, they knew that nothing above the ground would ever compare to the strange depth they had looked into that day. So, the question remains, what could have been in there? The footage analysis. The moment the crew studied the footage from the drone, everything they thought they knew about Mel's hole began to fall apart. The group had gone in as explorers, full of plans and control, but they walked out as people who had crossed into a place that should have been left alone. What they carried with them did not just raise eyebrows, it shifted the story. Once the recording was put online, it spread with unbelievable speed. It wasn't just a simple upload. It exploded across the internet and pulled in millions of eyes overnight. At first glance, the video seemed ordinary. The camera showed the drone lowering smoothly into the pit, the stone walls forming a curved tunnel that looked natural, even predictable. There was nothing wild or strange about the opening frames. Yet, as the descent continued and the minutes rolled on, small details began to pile up. Those details turned into anomalies, and each frame brought something stranger than the last. The first warning sign came from the temperature readings. The sensors showed a steady drop, even though science taught that the deeper one went into the Earth, the hotter it should become. Instead of warmth, the readings displayed bitter cold. Then bursts of light began to flash within the darkness. They did not appear regularly. They pulsed in rhythms, flickering like signals, as if something was trying to send out hidden messages. Some observers later compared the pattern to breathing, as though the darkness itself was alive. The walls also revealed strange reflections. At times, the stone shone briefly, as if firelight had struck polished obsidian, even though no flames were there. The only light came from the drone itself, yet the walls seemed to catch sparks of shimmer. The infrared sensors also picked up pockets of energy floating in the air. These clusters looked like heat shadows, though the entire environment remained frozen, as though the drone was being lowered into a freezer rather than a hole in the ground. At around the 500-foot mark, the sound began. At first, it was only a faint hum, a low vibration that carried through the stone. The hum grew louder as the drone sank deeper. It did not resemble interference or mechanical feedback. Instead, it carried a natural quality, like the very rock itself was shaking with some buried force. Soon, the hum broke into bursts of sound. Some listeners swore it carried the rhythm of whispers. Spectrogram analysis revealed something even stranger. The waveforms of the sounds did not match any normal geological event. They looked more like sonar or even distorted speech, the kind of sound created when human voices were reversed and stretched until almost unrecognizable. Layers of distortion hid the source, but the unnatural rhythm could not be ignored. Then, the most disturbing moment appeared. A shape began to form in the footage, barely visible at first, like a subtle shift in brightness against the wall. When slowed down, the recording showed a tall, thin figure. It looked like a body made of moving shadow, standing motionless between the camera and the stone. It did not drift. It did not fade away. It appeared all at once, and then darkness swallowed the frame. The feed collapsed. Data cut off instantly. The first upload came from a crew member who posted the footage to a private site. From there, it was copied countless times. It appeared on Reddit, Twitter, YouTube, and numerous Discord groups. Once it spread, the debate grew even larger. Some viewers claimed they saw another smaller figure in the background. Others slowed down the frames and swore that just before the blackout, eyes reflected the drone's light, staring directly into the lens. Different communities offered their own interpretations. Paranormal researchers described it as a living void. Tech experts labeled it an anomaly with awareness. Conspiracy forums claimed it was linked to secret underground vaults designed to monitor humanity. Even academics entered the debate. One theory proposed that the hole was a fold in dimension, a reversal of physical laws. Another said the strange energy resembled quantum echoes, time and space looping endlessly in a chamber. Meanwhile, some scientists even argued that the drone had not fallen downward at all, but instead had slipped sideways into another layer of existence. Among all the theories, the most haunting one suggested that the pit was not a hole at all. It resembled a vault, perhaps a locked chamber built ages ago. Whatever moved inside it was never meant to be seen. The drone had crossed into something that had been designed to remain hidden, and the release of the footage triggered more mysteries. The crew who lowered the drone vanished from public view. Their accounts went dark. They were present one day, and the next day, they seemed erased. Online interest was overwhelming at first, but then it slowed without reason. Platforms issued copyright strikes despite no registered copyright. Some users whispered that private warnings had been sent, threatening consequences if the footage stayed online. Channels disappeared. Entire forums collapsed. Yet no official group, no authority, admitted to any involvement. The strange part was not the noise around the event, but the absence that followed. The world moved on without explanation, as if by an unspoken agreement. The land itself, the area near Manastash Ridge, changed. Satellite imagery blurred the location, just as it had in earlier reports. Journalists stayed away. The hole seemed to draw attention only to push it away. It left behind a sense that whatever lived inside it belonged not to the surface world, but to the shadows below, locked away and better forgotten. But was the truth ever discovered? Let's find out. The legend behind Manastash Ridge. While the Mel's Hole mystery continued to fascinate many, information soon surfaced that seemed to prove otherwise. Mel Waters and others who claimed to have tracked down the strange pit never gave away its exact position. The most they would ever admit was that it lay somewhere along Manastash Ridge, roughly 9 to 10 miles southwest of Ellensburg. That vague description only fueled more curiosity. Yet, it left the mystery wide open, making the story grow bigger than anyone could have expected. One man who paid close attention to these claims was Jack Powell, a geologist with the State Department of Natural Resources. Powell, based in Ellensburg, had stumbled on the tale while driving home from work outside the county. He had tuned into one of the earliest broadcasts of Coast to Coast AM featuring Mel Waters. For Powell, it was more than background chatter. It caught his attention in a persistent way. Even though he knew the program often leaned into tales of strange creatures and flying objects, he still found the unfolding story hard to ignore. Powell's background gave him a sharper eye than most listeners. He had spent over 2 decades with the Department of Natural Resources and had taught geology for 11 years at Central Washington University. Before that, he had explored for petroleum companies. With 3 decades of experience studying the ground beneath eastern Washington, and with particular knowledge of the lower Kittitas County and the Manastash Ridge area, he felt certain he could piece together what was really going on. Powell's childhood memories gave extra weight to his understanding. He had grown up in the Kittitas Valley, and as a boy, he often explored an old gold mine shaft northwest of Ellensburg. That shaft, angled into the ground, fascinated him as a child. He knew it ran deep, maybe 90 feet or more. In its working days, he believed it might have reached as far as 300 feet. Still, those figures were nothing compared to the astonishing depth that Mel Waters had described on the radio. When Powell heard Waters claim the pit on Manastash Ridge dropped over 80,000 feet, he simply could not keep listening. His training told him such a thing could not exist. The deepest mine shaft on record only reached about 12,672 feet. The deepest cavern measured a little over 7,000 feet. Even the Russians, who drilled the deepest borehole in 1989, had only gone down 40,230 feet. Numbers like 80,000 feet belonged more to fantasy than geology. Powell knew the forces inside the Earth would never allow a hole of that scale to remain open. Pressure and heat would crush any such shaft, causing it to collapse in on itself. To him, the story only made sense if Mel Waters had borrowed from the old shaft he had explored as a boy. That mine sat on private property, ringed with barbed wire not far from state lands. Powell felt sure that someone had used that real but ordinary hole as inspiration for the more fantastic version that grew into a legend. After that radio broadcast, Powell put the story out of his mind. It did not come back into his life until 2001, when a caller reached out to him. The man was part of an online discussion group based near Seattle, and they were busy digging through every detail they could find about the mystery. They wanted to learn more about the geology of Kittitas County as part of their own search for the legendary pit. Powell agreed to help, mainly because he wanted them to have correct information about the land. On a Saturday, the group arrived, and Powell gave them his standard presentation. He broke down the county's geology in terms they could understand, and then went into more detail about the formations of Manastash Ridge. Afterward, he led them out to see the old mine shaft. To him, that spot explained everything, and he told them directly that this was the source of the story. The supposed hole on Manastash Ridge simply did not exist. The visitors listened politely and even treated him to dessert at the Copper Kettle restaurant afterward. Yet, despite his clear explanation, they refused to let go of their belief. They clung to the possibility that somewhere, hidden from sight, the bottomless pit described by Waters was waiting to be uncovered. Interestingly, it was from that same group of people that the Seattle Paranormal Society eventually formed, carrying the legend forward with even more energy. For Powell, the situation showed how myths could grow stronger even when faced with solid facts. The legend of Mel's Hole had taken root in people's minds, and once there, it refused to fade. It had no evidence behind it, no real ground to stand on, yet it endured year after year. Powell came to accept that such stories, once unleashed, cannot easily be undone. They continue to live on, shaping imaginations, even when the Earth itself says otherwise. But the idea had already sunk too deep into the minds of those who longed for it to be true. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.